week 16 of the fantasy football season, and right here, as of now, all these players are healthy and not as on the COVID list or anything. So here's a few running backs I would start this week. The first guy, Cordarrelle Patterson of the Atlanta Falcons. So Cordarrelle Patterson, he's been one of the only bright spots this season here for this Atlanta Falcon team, and he's been outperforming Mike Davis easily this year, who was one of their big off-season signings. So the last few games here for Cordarrelle Patterson, Week 13 versus Tampa Bay, 13 carries, 78 yards, 3 catches, 18 yards. Week 14 at Carolina, 16 carries, 58 yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 1 yard. And then last week, he got a touchdown called back, but he didn't do anything in that one. 11 carries, 18 yards, 2 catches, 5 yards. But this week here, a great matchup for Patterson and the Atlanta Falcons versus the Detroit Lions that give up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So Patterson obviously is a dual threat out of the backfield, former wide receiver, and he still lines up as a wide receiver as well sometimes here, this Atlanta Falcon team. So I think Cordarrelle Patterson could have a good game this week. Got a good matchup on paper. And let's face it, this Falcon team, they don't want to throw the football 40, 45 times during ball games because that's when they get in trouble and that's when they're trailing. But I think in this game versus Detroit, they're going to control the line of scrimmage here, and Patterson has a good one. The next guy, Sony Michel of the Los Angeles Rams. So over the last few weeks here, it looks like Michel's the lead back over there in Los Angeles, and he dominated the touches in that Week 15 sloppy matchup versus the Seattle Seahawks on Tuesday night. 18 carries in that one for Michel, and he had 1 catch as well for 23 yards. So Sony Michel, a more physical back in this backfield than Henderson, and the more healthy back as well over the last few years, even though we know Michel has had injury concerns throughout his career. But anyway, Week 13 versus Jacksonville, 24 carries, 121 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 8 yards. Week 14 at Arizona, 20 carries, 79 yards. And then, like I mentioned, versus Seattle, 18 carries, 92 yards, 2 catches, 23 yards. So right here, good matchup on paper in Week 16 in Minnesota. And right here, those few weeks Henderson missed, Sony Michel took the best of his opportunity, and now he's the starting running back in the most dominant running back in the backfield in terms of touches than Henderson. So right here, good matchup this week at Minnesota. He's going to get the touches. He's probably going to get goal line touches as well. And right here, he's in a high-powered offense in Los Angeles, even though I know they only scored 20 points in Week 15. It was a game where the Rams were thrown off with the Tuesday ball game, and it was tough to focus. But anyway, here, they'll go back playing Sunday, and I think Michel has a good game in that one, and he's a running back this week. The next running back's Michael Carter of the New York Jets. So the Jets here, one of the worst teams in all pro football, but one of the only few bright spots this season's been Michael Carter and rookie Elijah Moore, who's been out the last few games here. So Carter returned 15 of Miami, and he didn't do much. 8 carries, 18 yards, a catch for 2 yards. But right here, a good matchup in Week 16 versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. And right here at this point, the Jets, with 2-3 games left of the season, they're only going to want to see what these young guys do. So I think in this one, Michael Carter goes back to getting almost a full workload. Tevin Coleman ain't really a threat in my opinion. Ty Johnson is more of a passing downs back over there in New York. And P. Ryan, we haven't seen much from him in the first 2 seasons of his NFL career. So right here, back off the injury, he's going to get more touches in my opinion. Good matchup, game script where the Jets are going to run more. Because in Miami, that game, the Jets did have the lead as well, but then blew it and then had to pass a lot. But in this one, I think the Jets do come out on top in this one versus Jacksonville, even though it's not saying much. But it's saying much in terms of Michael Carter getting carries and being a consistent game script this week where they're running the ball. The next running back is David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. So Montgomery, he came back from injury as well 3 or 4 weeks ago here for this Bear team, and he's had the mixed bag of results. Week 13 versus Arizona, 21 carries, 90 yards, a touchdown, 8 catches, 51 yards. Week 14 at Green Bay, 10 carries, 42 yards, added 6 catches, 39 yards. And then Week 15 versus Minnesota, it was a chippy division matchup where both running backs pretty much didn't do much, in Dalvin Cook and Montgomery in that ball game. 18 carries, 60 yards, 5 catches, 23 yards, and a fumble loss. But Week 16 here, he's got a great matchup at Seattle that gives up the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs on the season. And right here, Justin Fields, he just hasn't looked good in my opinion in his rookie year. And right here, the Bears, I know they're out of contention. I know Seattle's out of contention as well this season here, but they're going to run the football. Montgomery's a pretty decent receiver out of the backfield, and Khalil Herbert really hasn't eaten into his workload as well. So with a good matchup on paper and a guy who's a pretty good receiver out of the backfield where he can make points up for you if he's not getting the rushing yards, I like Montgomery as a solid number 2 running back on your fantasy roster this week. And the 5th and final running back I would start is Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Sanders, he had a great ball game after coming off the bye week here in Week 15 versus Washington. So the last few weeks here, Sanders, he's finally picking things up and putting in some decent fantasy work. Week 12 at the Giants, 9 carries, 64 yards a catch. Week 13 at the Jets, 24 carries, 120 yards, 3 catches, 22 yards. And then Week 15 versus Washington, very fluid. He looked good. The ankle wasn't a concern. And he had 18 carries, 131 yards, and 2 catches for 15 yards. So right here with a good matchup on paper in Week 16 versus the Giants. And him having a mediocre game versus them the last time. I think this Eagle team here, they're going to come out firing. I know they're still fighting for a playoff spot at 7-7. And when they run the ball and pass the ball to a pretty even ratio, this is when this team is at its best. So right here versus a Giant defense that isn't all that good, I think Sanders has a good game. So that's a few running backs I would start here for Week 16 of the fantasy football season.